Well, hello and welcome to our webinar. The topic for today, Oracle migration to the cloud, a realistic roadmap, specifically focused on doing it in a way that really works. My name is Tony Butler and I'm joined by Krzysztof Kopieczek, Senior Cloud Architect, and also Piotr Kalinowski, Head of Data and AI. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions as we go through our discussion, then please do write them down in the Ask a Question section at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. If you've seen that someone else has already asked the question you were going to ask, then just vote for that same question. It will keep it near the top, and then we'll endeavour to answer that at the end of our session today. So today we've got four main topics that we really want to just delve into. We'll start with why so many migrations seem to fall apart even before they begin, not during the actual execution stage, but right in the planning phase of a project. Then we'll move into three specific preparation gaps we see over and over again with our clients. After that, we'll look at how to choose your target, OCI, GCP, Azure, AWS, and what Oracle Database as a Service actually means in practice. So listen out for that. And then we'll close our lessons with, or we'll close out our session with lessons from the field, things that perhaps aren't really covered in vendor documentation that you may see. So let's get started by firstly handing over to Piotr. Why now, Piotr?
Hi everyone, one more time. So, Tony, good question. Why now? And you should always ask yourself before doing something, asking why you should do this. And there are, three, let's say, main concerns about this. So, first of all, of course, is money. Money is always a crucial factor in different businesses, in IT especially. So money, because Oracle costs, especially Oracle license costs, can be very, very high. Also, Oracle support costs are a significant percentage of the whole cost of as a whole. It's approximately 22% of the license itself, and very often companies see these costs and they want to somehow look for a place where they can save some money, and this is the place when they can start from. The second point is licensing risk. Oracle audits has been, more and more serious topic in different areas, not only in IT but also, in legal, in financial market, and this is the place, where this licensing risk is growing. And third is generally pressure from above, from C-level people who wants to be like a cloud first, wants to migrate to the cloud, who wants to be a cloud native, who want to scale better, have better, possibility to easily expand their infrastructure on different regions, different markets. That's where the cloud comes in, and there comes the pressure to be more, let's say, cloud friendly, right? And this is a paradox because many customers, many companies, they need to migrate to the cloud, to the Oracle database. They need to do it somehow. The pressure is growing, but the rates of such migrations performed, it's not growing, right? It remains on the same level. So this is kind of paradox that we can observe on the market right now.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So, you've mentioned the word pressure a few times there. So we can see the pressure is there, but I'm guessing the path isn't always clear of how we get there. So perhaps just coming back to you again, why do so many projects seem to stall right even before they've properly started?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why those migration fails before they start? And the answer to this question is not very simple, but the issue is that the migration itself is not a problem. I mean, maybe not a problem, but it's not the place when the issue really is concerned. That the issue is before we start the migration. So during the planning phase, during the architecture phase, when we just plan the migration, here is the the space when the most of the mistakes arise. People don't ask questions about the migration, about how this migration should be performed, about why we should do this, how we should do this, which tools we need to use, how to measure, right, the success criteria. Here on the screen, we can see like 4, let's say, scenarios, and you can think of. So first of all, we have this cost pressure. So we don't really, so it's not a business really need to migrate the database, but kind of pressure from the above. This cloud, second is a cloud first mandate that we talk about, right? So we very often skip the architecture design, we skip the design of the cloud, we skip the landing zone, we skip those fundamentals that are crucial for the migration to be successful, but we just migrate. Third is we don't have success criteria defined. We don't have KPIs. We don't know what does it mean. What is the success for us in terms of migration, right? Is it just a database working on the cloud, or maybe to migrate also some subsystems, some applications? It's not really clear very often, and that's how the migration phase because we don't know what the success is. And fourth scenario that we showed here is basically we treat migration as a, let's say, next IT project that we need to build a team that will perform the migration and do this. It's not a really good way of thinking, because such migration very often touches many areas, many teams, many projects, applications in the organization as a whole. So we cannot really think of it as a single project that can be delivered in 1 or 2 sprints. It's a more sophisticated process that touches a wide spectrum of the organization and the people, not only IT people, but also different kind of areas.
Yes, so I want to show the contrast between 2 ways of running a migration, just to extend what Piotr already said. On the left, we have the IT project way, where we have one team when decisions are deferred, technical debt is accumulating quietly. The phrase probably we have all heard is, we will fix it after the migration. So I've been in project like that, in project like that, and this should be a red flag. And on the other side, on the right, we have an architecture-led transformation program, which has cross-functional authority to make a hard decision. Risks are surfaced early, and we have an explicit log of trade-offs. As you can see, the difference is very obvious here. For the architecture-led program, we do a lot of more planning beforehand.
So, I mean, that's been really interesting, guys. So I guess we've established why things fail, and that's quite a sobering thing when you think about, I guess, the cost involved in here, the investment. That's quite a sobering thought. So I know a few people probably in our audience maybe nodding at this point because maybe they've gone through it or they're going through it. So can we just be specific here? Krzysztof, you mentioned 3 gaps that seem to come up again and again. Can you just walk us through those?
Yeah, exactly. Because before we get we go deeper into this presentation, we need to set the stage. So we distinguish 3 gaps that we see in almost every project. First of all, KPIs are not set, or maybe are not explained to the team. So migration success is undefined, so it can be measured or communicated. Secondly, a thing called ecosystem blind spot. So maybe an organization plans an Oracle migration, thinking only about the database, not about the entire environment, entire ecosystem of different applications in the organization. By entire environment, I mean applications, I mean integration, batch processes, reports, even an identity. So without migrating the database, without mapping the whole system, creates a hidden debt in every untouched layer. And thirdly, lift and shift as a strategy rather than a tactic, and we will get to that in a moment. But first, let me explain those gaps, which first of is KPIs. And it's important to note that it's not about tracking everything. It's about defining a few measurable things and keeping focus on them. I will show you examples of what to measure across 5 different dimensions, which are performance, availability, cost, data integrity, and compliance and UX. It's really important to set those KPIs before migration, because we see very often that after the migration, some weights on KPIs may be changed by stakeholders, and without these KPIs, post-migration, the first post-migration incident becomes a political crisis rather than just a ticket. So we have this 5 dimensions of KPI targets, and the performance is first of them. And the key principle here is before migrate anything, measure everything. Of course, everything you can. If there's something that you don't measure, set a very high priority to add the monitoring over this layer. And on-premises baseline is the foundation, without which you can't say that anything is better or worse after the migration, right? And quickly, some concrete targets from our project. And I need to, say a quick disclaimer here. These are example targets from multiple of our projects, and please don't be too optimistic for your targets, but it's always something to have in mind. So first of all, the 95th percentile of response times should be faster or at least the same as on premises. So this means zero regression. Benchmarks show that with proper tuning, latency can reduce up to about 30%. This latency on parallel queries, and cache hit ratio can improve up to 20%. So now you can probably imagine that setting those KPIs without knowledge how the system works on premises, it's impossible. One more thing, it's worth setting CPU target below 70% at peak, just to have a room for spikes in the traffic. And choosing a cloud solution for your Oracle target, I'm stepping forward a bit, but choosing a cloud target can help you to set scaling options. All right, another KPI is availability. So one important rule here is to set RTO and RPO per workload, not globally. And why does it mean so much? Because the sub 1 hour RTO costs up to 5 times more than a 4-hour target. If you set a global 1 hour RTO for all systems, you will most probably overpay, and most probably you don't need it unless you are dealing with some life critical systems. Last number worth noting is the cost of a downtime. It of course depends on organization, depends on your usage, but we saw numbers exceeding $100,000 of a downtime cost per hour with our customers. And finally, costs and data and that data integrity. To being honest, total cost of ownership, I mean TCO, is very different for every organization. But again, what we saw with our customers is about 30% of versus on-premises. And I will say it again, verify it before migration starts. Bring your own license is one of the most powerful financial levers for Oracle. If you have enterprise edition licenses, you can bring them to Oracle Autonomous Database and get a huge discount. Data integrity, 3 nines, so 99.9 is the minimum for critical data, but probably you will set your own target for your own organization. Very often, we need to see the same set of data after the migration, so 100%. No acceptable threshold for missing production records are understandable. All right, that's all from KPIs. Number two to Piotr.
Yeah, gap number two, if you are talking about critical gaps in this whole migration process, is the fact that the database is usually not only the data, right? Especially in Oracle ecosystem, where this ecosystem is very wide with different services, right? So we don't only migrate data, it's one large piece of migration, but we also migrate database objects like stored procedures, triggers, sequences, functions, whatever. All these mechanisms is also to be translated. And Oracle itself is not just a database, right? So some integration layers that can be built on top of Oracle ecosystem, APIs, some middlewares, message queues, etc. Some BI systems, right, or BI connections to external systems. Also, the Oracle comes with a lot of ETL tools, jobs or loaders, ETL processes. Those also needs to be migrated somehow. Also, the full security model, the identity and access control roles, users, hierarchy, all of those needs to be somehow migrated into the new database or maybe rebuilt in a new way, right? There's other aspects that are not mentioned here on the slide. Oracle itself gives possibility to build web applications or some other applications or some systems that can that when the database is heart of the system, right? But on top of this, we can build different products, and also these products need to be somehow migrated, either rebuilt, either we can think of how we can do this, but we need to take it into consideration, and this might be a significant cost and significant effort to perform migration or of such objects in the database.
So gap number 3, lift and shift is a tactic, not a strategy. So lift and shift, meaning moving the system as is. It's a completely legitimate tactic. It can make sense when speed is the priority and you have plan for modernization for later. The problem starts when lift and shift becomes the strategy by default through absence of a decision, not a well thought out choice. At that point, 3 critical questions go unanswered. So first, where do we land with our system? We have Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. We have an offering called Oracle Database Add. Each has different regular coverage, but we will talk about this later. And of course, maybe you would like to leave Oracle and choose another database. Those are all possible options. Secondly, how deeply do we change? The spectrum of the change runs from rehost to retire, depending on what you choose during the planning stage. And thirdly, do we build a new landing zone, or we just extend existing infrastructure?
Thanks, guys. So it's pretty clear, I think, now that we know the gaps, and there are a few. So I think probably the natural question now that perhaps our audience might be thinking about is that given all that we know, how do we then actually decide what to do, where to go? Perhaps, Piotr, we'll come to you just to help us understand a bit more about that decision framework.
Yeah, so in terms of the decision framework, we usually follow the 5R strategy. And these, all of these are basically 5 options that we can choose from. And all of them has some pros and cons. So depending on what we need to choose one of these, or sometimes we can choose kind of combination of a few. So first of all is the one that Krzysztof was already talking about. So the lift and shift strategy. So basically move to the cloud systems as they is, right? Mainly using some virtual machines. We just install the software, right? The Oracle database instead of on our on-prem infrastructure, we put it into the cloud. And this, this is useful when we don't have much time for the migration, when the speed is important. However, the benefits of this way of migrating can be not very significant because of the cost, mainly. And very often we see from our experience that the cost of such migration after it, the cost of the cloud can be significant. Second idea is to re-platform. So we basically move from traditional Oracle databases into the Oracle managed services, for example, using Oracle Cloud. This can be, an option for the companies. It's kind of a mid-level way of, in terms of cost and in terms of the time. Then we have the refactor. So we basically sacrifice time to re-architect our architecture, to refactor maybe some piece of code in order to be more, let's say, cloud native. This can work. Again, here we can use, for example, Oracle Cloud infrastructure for these cloud native services, which are there already. We'll talk about this in a few slides. And then there are, let's say, 2 other options: repurchase. So we basically try to replace our solution with some ready-to-use already existing products, software service mainly, right? It's very, we have high commodity. It's easy to do. But, we are a little bit limited to the offering from the market. And last, my favorite, to be honest, not only is possible, it's retire, right? So we should always ask ourselves a question: okay, do we really need this? Do we really need this database, this system? And do we need this in such form, right? Maybe we can transform it into something else that will be easier to migrate and to manage later. And very often, this question sounds stupid, but this question is one of the first questions that we ask our customers, and the answer is not very often so obvious. So these 5, strategies are kind of guidelines for us to follow. Most of the time, we choose something between rehost or replatform, depending, on the version of the architecture, of the licensing model, and so on and so forth. But this is just statistics from our cases.
So first of the possible targets that we would like to explain today is Oracle database at cloud, to be specific. It's not an Oracle installed on a VM at a hyperscaler of your choice. It is an OCI managed state-of-the-art Exadata hardware physically located inside a hyperscaler data center that you choose. So what does it mean in practice? You get a full Oracle feature set, you get Exadata performance, and a billing with your hyperscaler. But you don't get multi-availability zone architecture, and you don't have a shared VPC with your database. I will explain it later. And most importantly, you don't have coverage in every region. It's worth noting that choosing Oracle database may be either a replatform or a rehost, depending where are you coming from. Regional coverage is a hard architectural constraint, not an assumption. More on that in the next slide. So the current state of Q1 2026 is that we have 8 active regions in GCP. Some of them, some next regions are planned, but I need to make a disclaimer first. If you are planning a migration, considering moving, please do not believe slide on the webinar. Just go to the documentation and verify it by yourself. But back to the regions, Azure it's the broadest coverage of all 3 hyperscalers. We have over 30 regions. And in AWS, currently 9 or 10 regions, and planning to expand to over 20 additional regions. And the warning at the bottom, we have a project, we've seen a project reach the architectural review stage and only then discovered that the required compliance region isn't yet supported by Oracle database offering. So again, that's why I'm saying it twice or 3 times or even more often, that you need to check the regional availability at the start of the project. Some of the things that we noticed during having project with Oracle database it's number 1, architectural constraints. So first, the regional split risk. So Oracle database may not be available in the same region where the rest of your organization lives in. So probably maybe you will have to place database in different region, different from the rest of the system. So consequences are quite obvious. Latency between the app tier and database tier, added complexity to the routing, firewall rules, potential data residency implications. It can be done. It can be done, but it's worth knowing before the migration. Secondly, this multi-availability zone architecture. Oracle database lives in a single availability zone. Exadata redundancy covers the node, disk, rack level failures, but it doesn't span multiple availability zones. Cross-region disaster recovery is available, but at higher cost and latency than a standard multi-availability zone standby setup. It may not be a blocker for you, but is worth noting that you are limited to a single availability zone, especially in the recent days when you see that some zones may be impacted by a drone damage or a fire or anything like this. Next, the identity and network. I mentioned that the Oracle Database Add is a Oracle Cloud Infrastructure offering, and I mentioned that the physical server is located in your hyperscaler data center, but still we need access to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure console for a management, for a control plane. So most probably you don't have your organization identity there. So every engineer who needs to manage the database, scale it, manage backups, anything like that, must have an OCI identity. That means probably you will need to federate your identity to the OCI. Or you will create accounts for them manually without the identity federation. And lastly, last architectural constraint is the network, because Oracle Database Add requires some dedicated network to locate the database in there. So it doesn't use or share your existing VPC, VNet, whatever. Connecting it to the application layer requires private peering or transit networking, route tables, firewalls configurations. If you are dealing with networking on a daily basis, probably you already noticed that it may be a challenge to configure. Next, the code and application traps with this offering. This is the list of things that don't migrate alongside the database. So any of them can catch a project off guard. It is, very good to know these traps before the migration project starts. So just we will run through them quickly. So usually we see when we migrate Oracle systems that we migrate from an old version of Oracle to the most recent one, right? So Oracle version post migration will be higher. That implicit that all client libraries should be and needs to be updated across every application. But this is not optional. This is a hard requirement. Secondly, all applications needs to be tested. So even if you hadn't touched that application in 3 years, 5 years, or more, it's not an excuse. You need to change the configuration and then test it for regression. Next, execution plans don't migrate. The query optimizer on the new environment may choose different plans, probably better, but you need to know it and allocate a dedicated sprint budget for some optimizations. Next is quite a big one, because bfile, the native Oracle mechanism, does not move. It's not available with the Oracle Database Add. So if you use this technology, you need to move the blobs files to another storage and mount it with NFS. This may also require some changes in the application code. That it's worth noting it before. From our experience, at least 3 items from this table appear in every project. Now we will switch a bit to another option.
Yeah. Another option is basically totally moving from Oracle into something else, like, for example, the well-known database PostgreSQL. And this database is, first of all, very common. And the Oracle PG tool is one of the most popular or well-known open source tool for doing this migration from Oracle into Postgres. And why we like Oracle PG as a tool? First of all, it's open source, of course. But secondly, it can generate a migration assessment report. And it generates this report even before we start the migration. So before we do this, we can check how it's easy to migrate our database. Which features will be migrated easily, which features require some manual steps to perform. And this assessment report gives like a clear vision. Is it worth it to migrate, or how much effort it requires from us to move from Oracle to Postgres database? So the Oracle PG can, migrate, of course, the data. It generates the SQL scripts in Postgres. It can transform or migrate the functions, procedures, triggers, etc. One area that Oracle PG has, let's say, some problems and issues is basically the PL SQL language. So all the code that we have in this language can require some manual rewriting. That's one of the things we need to consider doing this whole process. But other parts are, let's say, quite well covered by the Oracle PG. So also, schema transformation, schema conversion from Oracle to Postgres, etc. Our recommendation, basically here, in terms of Oracle PG, is to run this assessment first as a, let's say, first step, and then decide what will happen, right? If the assessment says that, okay, the migration will be quite easy, we can go with the migration. If not, because it also sometimes happens, then we should think about some alternatives, or maybe count the cost, how much it will cost us in terms of money and effort doing this migration. So all in all, there are like three strategic options that we can choose from, right? The first is Oracle Database at Cloud. So if you want, to bring your license right to the cloud, if you want to stay in this Oracle ecosystem, use this. If you want to go with the hyperscaler, also go this way. So yeah. On the if you want to go other way, so you want to, let's say, get rid of Oracle ecosystem, you are open for migration to something else, like Postgres, for example. You can choose Postgres in the cloud native, let's say, schema. If you are, eager to change, you are not afraid of changing these database vendors. Feel free to go with the PostgreSQL with Oracle PG as a tool, for example. And if you are somewhere in between, so you want to stay within your Oracle ecosystem, for example, because of Oracle license, but you don't want to be dependent on the hyperscaler, please consider Oracle Database at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. There are multiple ways how to set up the database there, depending on your needs. You add one more vendor, the cloud vendor, right? But you get this flexibility and still you remains in the Oracle ecosystem as it is. There's other options that we are not going to cover much, but just for your information, also AWS and Google Cloud Platform has their own capabilities of migrating the Oracle database into their systems.
Thanks. And I guess that if any of our audience want to discuss any of those sort of alternatives, then we'd be open to have that conversation, I would imagine. So, well, been through a lot today, a lot of territory covered. And I think it certainly shows just how many moving parts there are within a migration. But before we wrap up, I know, it's nice to always have something to leave with or something to take away. So perhaps, Krzysztof, we could just come to you. What are the 5 things to take away from today?
Maybe before we go to this takeaways, I also want to cover one more thing, if you have just very quickly time, because the AI is coming. It's already came to our world, and we also wanted to somehow leverage the AI to perform this migration. So this is where we build kind of custom AI solution, and we leverage Ora2PG also to speed up the process of migration. And this is a concrete scenario that we use on one of a customer, right? So in fact, we use the Ora2PG because the customer wanted to migrate to Postgres, but we also leverage some AI tools. So how we do this? It was a very, very simple setup. We start the migration on the left-hand side, as you can see on the diagram. The Ora2PG generated the migration list in terms of table space, tables, partitions, procedures, and so on and so forth. So all these objects were on the list to migrate. Then we iterated on each of these objects, right, that should be migrated. And we picked one of these objects. And then we ran the Ora2PG migration script on the selected type only, right? So only, for example, a given table or only on a given, procedure. And then if it was successful, the migration, we just appended the SQL to the target SQL file. So it was like an end result of our migration. But if not, if any error occurred, we run our, let's say, AI agent, right? That was his job, was to basically figure out what is the error, why the error occurred, what was the reason of the unsuccessful migration, and fixed it, right? This is how it works. We have the AI agent. We put we created knowledge base. So we use the very famous popular RAG approach here. And this AI agent used this knowledge base in order to fix the SQL errors that occurs during the migration, during the Ora2PG script. Then try to rerun the Ora2PG with fixed changes in kind of sandbox. If it was okay, we appended the SQL to target SQL file, so it was like an end result. If not, we put, we didn't make a infinite loop for the agent. We put this human in the loop here. So basically, if not, we escalated to the data engineer. So he needed to manually resolve the problem. The knowledge base itself was ingested with 4 data sources, right? So kind of fixed pattern library. So basically an open catalog of known, conversion errors and fixes. Then we put the documentation, so mapped documentation for the SQL syntax from Oracle to PostgreSQL. Then project-specific context, right? So very specific information about the project itself, schemas, naming conventions, some rules, etc. And also all the past data engineer fixes. So if something was fixed, we put it into the knowledge base. So the AI agent was learning iteratively. And this knowledge base, together with all these AI agent approach you can see on the screen, automates us a lot in terms of migration. It helps a lot. It speeds up the migration by 20 or even 30% per migration. And what's important, it could learn from this data engineer input, and it was smarter. The most migration it did, the smarter it became. And so this is the idea of our AI-driven, let's say, migration.
Thanks, Peter. How could we not have a webinar and not talk about AI? So thanks for adding that bit at the end there and keeping it on track. So perhaps, Krzysztof, we can just come to you now to just highlight those 5 key takeaway points.
Right. Right. So first of all, migrations fall in planning stage. Keep it in mind. So invest in disproportionately in a discovery and a KPI definition, not the transfer itself. Gather all the stakeholders and set those KPIs in stone. Secondly, yeah, KPIs. Set KPIs before touching the infrastructure. I would say that KPIs act as a contract between IT and business. And as I said, without them, every incident after the migration becomes a political crisis. Thirdly, lift and shift is a tactic, possibly the right one for your situation, but it must be a conscious decision, not default. Right? Remember that the phrase that we will fix it after the migration. We all heard that, and it very often after the migration won't apply. Fourth, Oracle. Make sure to check the Oracle database at regional availability, because it's a hard constraint, right? Fifth, code changes ripple across the entire organization. Every team that touches Oracle, including those with unmaintained applications, must be engaged and must test their systems after the migrations. Maybe a bonus one, number 6. We don't have it on a slide here, but try AI agent. Maybe do some POC before even the project will start.
Thanks, Krzysztof. Some really good key takeaways there. And I think just another thing that I picked up just to share from this webinar is that in Oracle migration, it's a transformation program. It's not an IT task. And I think the sooner the organizations understand that within their organization, the more problems can be avoided up front. So just want to say thank you so much to you, Krzysztof, Piotr. That was genuinely a really good lot of information that you've covered. So thank you very much for that. I can see that we've got a number of questions that have been raised. So let's just try and answer those if we can. Let me bring those up. So I think we had our first one was from Alexander, where he said, what's the definition of a legacy Oracle system? Well, that's a big question, I think.
Well, we can search Wikipedia for a proper definition, but for me, a legacy system is a system that works for some time. Maybe there's an active development then, but not necessarily. It's a system that was deployed, it's running, it's working, it's providing its goal, but maybe it's finally the time that you notice that we have some system that may be out of support or should be tweaked a bit. This is my definition of a legacy system. Piotr, maybe it's a bit different for you.
No, I agree with you totally. And in terms of Oracle legacy system, right, we very often have in mind the on-prem databases that reside somewhere in the infrastructure. They are used usually, right, by the applications, but the challenge is that we need to, or we want to do with them somehow, and we don't really know what.
Okay, thanks guys. We've got another question from Camille. How do you actually establish a reliable on-prem baseline before moving, and which Oracle tools give the best data for this?
So I mentioned in my somewhere at the beginning of the presentation that before moving anything, measure everything, and of course it's a big statement here, but this is the key step in the migration to set proper KPIs. In order to set KPIs, you need to measure. So use whatever tool you are using to measure the application. If there's an application in there, if there's not application, there are some tools that may help. I'm trying to switch slides to the beginning when we have them on screen. Yeah, this is the slide. So we see what we saw in multiple projects that people use different tools for the database. So use anything you use for the daily work with Oracle and set some goals. And for the applications, I hope you use some application performance monitoring tool. Take requests from there. Take endpoints from the APM tool, set the average response time, and make sure that they are no slower after the migration.
Excellent, thank you. This is quite an interesting one from John. What does an application portfolio assessment look like in practice? Who runs it? How long does it take? And what output does it produce? We ought to add anything to that?
I can answer it also. So I'm a strong believer in workshop approach. When we meet with different stakeholders, invite people that are developing application and map out every integration that the system is connecting to, or map out every system that is pushing data to our system. It may be different from various applications, various systems. Maybe you have data warehouse, maybe you have some CRUD application, but usually some kind of a big picture event storming, it's a good place to start.
Excellent, thank you. It's interesting, some of these questions that we sort of think, maybe these are the questions that our listeners are actually asking internally within their organization. In fact, the one from Jerry I thought was interesting, that if we choose lift and shift, what are the indicators to tell us it's time to re-platform so that we're not stuck there forever? I guess that's something that a lot of organizations could be having to answer.
Yeah, this is dangerous because maybe after you moved your application in a lift and shift tactic, the application works well, and maybe now stakeholders decide it's fine. Let's leave it like this. This is dangerous. But most importantly, from my perspective, define the replatform, the trigger, the decision that makes the decision. Make this decision before you migrate, right? Not after.
Yeah, I think that's a.
If I may ask something to the question, I mean, the answer is not easy to answer, not trivial, because it mainly depends on the KPIs. So as Krzysztof mentioned, it may appear that after lift and shift, the business is happy with it, it works well. So maybe there's no need to migrate to re-platform the whole solution. But we need to have those KPIs well defined, and we need to observe them, right? Maybe the costs is one of the KPI, the cloud cost, for example. This is one of the potential place when we would like to re-platform the solution. But also the question is, do we have time for this? Because it requires some effort. So we also need to spend some time and money. So the KPIs are crucial here, and it's not the easy answer.
I guess that comes back to that point around it's a transformational thing, not just an IT task. So it's an ever evolving thing that we always need to be looking at so that we don't get left behind. So yeah, some really interesting questions today. Thank you so much to our listeners for bringing those in. So that just brings an end to our Q&A section. In fact, to the webinar today. If there's been a section of this webinar that you've missed and you want to watch again, then just look out for a link that will be emailed to you because you will be able to watch it again. We just want to say a huge thanks to Krzysztof and Piotr for all your insights in this really interesting topic. If you have any questions that are specific to your organization or your strategy, and you require assistance, excuse me, with your migration, your planning or implementation, then please do feel free to reach out to us. Thank you to the team behind the scenes for running the webinar for us. And most of all, thank you to you, our audience, for joining us here today. We hope that it's been an interesting webinar, an insightful one for you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.